Welcome to Timberline Bass Podcast, your place for Wisconsin bass fishing and everything outdoors.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Timberline Bass Podcast. Tonight we are going to be answering a really important question. So, if you could build the perfect bass angler, whether you're Dr. Frankensteining them out of cadaver bits, genetically engineering in a test tube, what traits can we identify and which ones would be the most useful in making the perfect bass angler? Um, you know, so many of us have, there's downfalls, the terrifying tackle collections, I'm as guilty as anybody. The beginning of the year, I straighten my boat out all nice. By the end of the season, I can't find anything. It's buried everywhere. You got the guy that only throws jigs 365 days a year. But at the same time, you got the guy that never misses a cast, backs down the ramp perfectly every single time, regardless of what the conditions are. Um, the guy who, no matter on the days when you can't buy a bite, makes every decision perfectly, just off the cuff. Um, Sorry, going through my notes again. So we'll get into that here in a minute. First, we'll kind of do some quick updates. Around Wisconsin here. Was out fishing again this weekend. Got some more stuff straightened out on the boat. Working on getting the prop situation all figured out. Everything's looking pretty good there. The boat, aside from performance running wise, all the electronics are working the way they're supposed to. Getting used to fishing on a bigger boat. It was kind of funny the first couple times I was out. My old boat had such a small deck. I basically had a 2 foot by 2 foot square when I had rods on the deck that I could stand on, and that was pretty much all I had. So getting used to having a nice wide open deck where I'm not tripping and falling on stuff and breaking rods is taking a little bit of getting used to, but we're getting there. Um, Updates for Wisconsin itself. I mean, anybody who lives here knows weather can't decide what it's going to do. It'll be 70 one day, 30 the next day. Every time I've gone out, it is just absolutely blown like you would not believe. Um, I think a lot with the weather patterns and everything, the fish have been kind of lockjawed. I'm definitely not a phenomenal spring fisherman. Spawn onwards, I do fine, but there's a lot of times pre-spawn, it kicks my ass. I don't know a better way of saying it. But it's starting to get better. I mean, yeah, a guy's got to wonder how much of it is the time of the year, how much is the conditions we've been dealing with. Um, but we're getting there. Tonight we're also gonna add a new segment that I'm gonna call the budget build segment. Every week I'm gonna try to come up with, something, whether it's, a rod reel combo or just a budget way to get into a new technique. Maybe at some point we'll even break down budget boats or, getting a tow rig on a budget. But tonight we're gonna do um a skipping rig, getting set up, rod, reel, line, all that good stuff. What I personally use most of it, but we're gonna try to keep it under $300, and I think I did pretty good and have a pretty good setup for somebody looking to learn how to do it or just looking to have another skipping rod on the deck and don't want to blow the bank on it. Um, but so starting out, our main segment tonight is going to be building the perfect angler. I think that can definitely be broke down into four real categories, but I don't think you can build the perfect angler without looking at um, what the fatal flaw is. There's always something holding us back, and sometimes it changes day to day. But I feel like a guy's got to touch on that too, just to do the whole thing any sort of justice. I mean, because at the end of the day, there is no such thing as a perfect angler. We've seen some pretty amazing anglers throughout the years that are pretty darn close to perfect. Just seen some phenomenal, unreal stuff. But at the end of the day, our sport, you're not going to win 100% of the time. You're not going to figure it out every single day. I don't care who you are, how good you are. You're going to have crap days. Um, that's part of the reason I wanted to do a podcast and not just make stupid YouTube videos, because anybody can throw together a highlight reel from a day on the water. I mean, yeah, sure, that guy could, those were five great fish catches, but them were the only five fish he caught all day, and maybe he caught them over a week. Who knows? It's their story. Let them tell it, I guess. But so starting out here, I think the first, arguably, in my opinion, the most important thing to tournament bass fishing is mentality. Um, I know 9 times out of 10 when I have a crap day, it's because my head isn't in it. I'm worrying about stuff off the water, or, heaven forbid you have boat troubles or something like that. That ruins my whole day. I just can't get my head back into it. But again, on those magic days where everything goes good and you can't do wrong, it seems like everything can go wrong and it doesn't matter. Somehow it benefits you, somehow it forces you in the right direction. Not an overly religious guy, but sometimes it's God kicking you in the ass saying, "All right, come on, we gotta go do this instead." But being able to keep your mind in it and on the goal. Um, so one big part of mentality, I feel like you're always riding a line between patience and aggressiveness. Some days when it's really finessey, you're drop shotting or Ned rigging or wacky rigging a Cinco, Nico rigging, whatever. I mean, those definitely seem like the days where patience comes into play. Um, Knowing when you need to slow down and really pay attention. I mean, I've 90% of the time on a jig bite, here comes the aggressive part of it. You skip under a dock and normally that jig never touches the bottom. 90% of your bites when you're skipping docks with a jig comes on the fall. That's why it's so important that you play with the jig weight, the trailer. You have so much control over the fall rate just by playing with the weight and the body shape of your plastic on there. Um, you can fine tune the heck out of it. On those days when they're hitting it on the drop, you can be more aggressive. Make 2, 3 casts to a dock. If you're not getting hit, move on. But every once in a while, you get one of those days where you throw it out, and the first 5 docks, it's because it's normally an aggressive bite. You fly through, and you're not getting any. And I think this is what makes or breaks most dock fishermen. It's that ability to catch on to that and slow down for a second. Okay, here maybe I'll go back and fish them first 5 docks, and I will just let it fall and sit on the bottom. Maybe shake it a little bit. Try that, on a few docks. Maybe sometimes that's all it needs to hit the bottom, sit a minute, get that little twitch that piques their interest, and they bite it. Other days, they just want it sitting there. And it's unfortunately when it's a bite like that, a lot of times you don't even feel the bite. It's literally a matter of sitting there watching your line, or you'll turn your back for a second and look, and all of a sudden your line will be out away from the dock. Well, all you can really do at that point is hurry up, reel down, and hope it's still there when you crack them. But So the knowing when to be patient and when to be aggressive is probably one of the biggest keys to mentality fishing. Um, Another really important thing is confidence. I mean, I know guys that throw baits that I would never throw. But for some reason, at some point, they did good enough on it that they have a ridiculous amount of confidence in it. And I've seen it my whole life. Confidence makes the man. I mean, if you walk in and you're unsure of yourself or second guessing, you're gonna get shit on every time. I mean, pardon my French, but it's the truth. It's those guys that walk in, cock of the walk, chest out, nose up, which isn't always a good thing. You can be too confident, but going into a situation knowing you're going to be fine, I have faith in this, and having the confidence to just play it out. But the double-edged sword to that is being able to adapt to situations. Yeah, that's why mentality is such an important and strange part of fishing and life in general. Um, there's a lot of days I go in, I pre-fish 2 weeks before. This is how it's going. I've been watching the weather patterns, keeping an eye on temperature, watching your moon phases, all that good stuff. And, by God, this is what they're going to be doing today. And if I had a dollar for every time I was wrong, I'd have a lot more money doing that than I would cashing checks in tournaments. I mean, let's be honest, 99% of us, that's the truth. Um, oh, wow. Um, but so being able to look at a situation and say, hey, this isn't doing what we're needing it to do. Let's go from plan A to plan B. Well, now plan B ain't working, but hey, we picked up another clue. Let's try plan C. Just being able to adapt on the fly. And as much crap as I get for the amount of stuff I keep in my boat, that's where my adaptability comes in. I mean, I've got something for every situation. It might not always be the perfect thing, excuse me. But there's something there no matter what. Um, so I think adaptability is a huge part of the mentality of fishing. Um, and the other thing is too, we kind of covered this with the patience, but just the ability to slow down. Slow down in everything though, not just the presentation and how you're working a bait. Slow down going down the bank. Make 2, 3 casts to a tree. Sometimes that's the trick. Sometimes you got to run the bait past them 2, 3 times. Maybe you got to make the same cast 3 times. Maybe you just got to fish the same thing a structure a handful of times. Um, but just slow down and pick stuff apart sometimes. It's so easy to get in your head and start to spin out and just rush through stuff, and it'll screw you more often than not. And this kind of brings us to my next point too. Um, the ability to junk fish. I don't know how many times that saves my rear end to just run down a bank and fish crap. I mean, not what I want to be doing. Nothing else is working. They're not out deep. Start flipping just, trees, look for rock, keep an eye, keep adapting with the situation and fishing what you can find. And a lot of times that'll put together a pattern for you. Hey, they're on, you know, twigs, they're on overhanging trees, they're just sitting under but the limbs got to be touching the water. The limbs can't be touching the water. I mean, just the ability to look at the scenario and roll with the punches is paramount to being successful in anything you do, but especially bass fishing. Um, I often wonder what's more dangerous when I'm being stubborn on something. I mean, there has been times where you can wait it out, and all of a sudden, the last half hour of the day, bam, you bang out one hell of a limit. Maybe didn't get first, but you salvage some points. Or is it more dangerous to be the overthinking angler? I've got my days where I'm that way too. Well, this ain't working. The last tournament it burned me when I didn't just or when I stuck it out all day. Well, then all of a sudden you see 30 rods on my deck and I'm flinging everything, which is a terrible thing to do. I, it can help you, but it should not be the go-to thing. And I practice what you preach, but it's a hard thing to get over. And this is why I'm not a perfect angler. Um, so I would definitely say, the first thing to building a perfect angler is finding somebody, or the ability to have a happy medium between the patience and the aggression. Be confident but adaptable. Slow down when you need to, and the ability to just make decisions on the fly. And I don't know if you can really count it as part of mentality, but there are just guys out there that have, I don't know if it's just such a good grasp of fish behavior or what's going on around them. Um, but it's almost like a sixth sense, the ability to trust your gut. I don't know how often in my life my gut has absolutely, you just get a bad feeling or a good feeling, or running down the lake and, well, watching the map when you're going and, well, shit, let's stop for a minute and fish this point. Or, that little cut kind of looks like it could be good. Let's just bail and give it 10 minutes and see what happens. All things that come down to the mentality. I would say our second category is going to be casting and technical ability. Um, to me, I guess this is where it's going to kind of get to my test or my taste. Um, what I see is a perfect skill set in an angler, and I'm a little bit biased. Like I grew up fishing docks. That's my go-to when all else fails. Go bang a jig off a pontoon. So I would say my to me one of the most important skills you can have in your repertoire is skipping. And it's not just ducks, fish in the bank in general, being able to skip up under cover, whether it's overhanging limbs or up into a willow tree, and being able to split the gap, thread the needle, if you will, between branches. The more you do it, the more comfortable you are, the less backlashes, the less, you know, just off aim casts you have, the more efficient you are, and the more that bait's in the water and the more casts you make, the higher your chances of finding fish. Because let's be honest, 90% of fishing on the bank, you're just making casts till you stumble on them. That's fishing in general. But the more efficient you can be, I mean, KVD is the freaking god of fishing efficiency. Um, and his philosophy was always make as many casts as you can and burn it by as many fish as you can. You're not going to catch every one, but the more that see it, the higher your chances of catching one. Um, it kind of goes hand in hand with skipping in my mind, is being able to flip, flipping trees, flipping stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of an old school mentality, but that's a should be a really important part of anybody's repertoire. I mean, most guys are pretty good at flipping stuff. Another one, and I don't know, this is maybe plays more often in Wisconsin, Florida, heavy vegetation places, but frog fishing. Being comfortable bombing a frog on frickin' rope 50 yards back into some lily pads and having the confidence to get it out of there, but also knowing how to control a cast in the wind, knowing the tricks with frogs. I mean, I'll be honest, there's not a frog out there I throw stock out of the package. Whether I'm bending hooks a little bit or adding weight to it to make it more castable, or another big one, if it's really thick duckweed or something like that, sometimes I'll purposely get rid of some of the buoyancy of the frog. I'll weight it down so it starts to sink super slow, and when I work it, I pop it back up to the surface. Sometimes that's the thing. You got to get through the cheese and let them see what they're doing. What you're throwing at them. Um, and a frog is not a one trick pony. Most guys do think of, fishing pads and thick vegetation and duckweed, but a lot of times skipping it up again. skipping a frog on the bank, running it around trees, running it around stumps, up underneath, willows and stuff like that. All that stuff plays. And there's skipping a frog is different from skipping a jig, skipping a Cinco. I mean, so that's just another skill set I see is absolutely important. Another one is bait cadences. When I'm fishing a swim jig, you don't just throw it out and reel it in. I mean, sometimes it works, but sometimes I'll give it two, three cranks and then I'll give it a hard crank. Or sometimes every so many cranks, I'll just snap the tip of my rod a little bit like I'm fishing a jerk bait. You got the old Alabama shake like you're having a seizure while you're fishing. I mean, that clearly works. There's a lot of guys that do it. Um, or a jerk bait, snap, snap, pause, snap, snap, pause. Doing it, do I need a 2 second pause? Do I need a 15-second pause? Is it a suspending jerk bait? Do I just need to get it down there and let it sit? Um, so having a good understanding of cadences and knowing how to change it up till you find what they want and having some in your back pocket that are just staple go-tos. Um, Nowadays, I would say one skill that is absolutely irreplaceable if you remotely want to compete in any way, shape, or form is understanding electronics. And I'm not even just saying live scope. Um, Live scope's important. It's part of the game. Uh, but I feel like understanding electronics is so much more than that. Know how your graphs work. Like on the new Explorer units, when I'm side imaging, I split my screen in half. I'll run the map on one side and the side imaging on the other. But then on my map, I'll overlay, you can run bars out so you can see how far the side imaging is actually scanning. So you have a scale to know how far you're actually looking. Being able to read side imaging, being able to go through and pick out fish, look for bait balls, recognizing vegetation, knowing gravel and grass. I mean, that's a pretty key skill in understanding electronics. The ability to read mapping, I think is absolutely a must, not only for safety, um, knowing where you can run, where you can't, uh being able to look at a graph or know how to shade it. Hey, today I'm looking for drop offs going from 4 foot that make a shelf and drop off straight down into 10 foot. Knowing how to, honestly, reading a topographic map, it's a pretty freaking basic skill, but there's a lot of guys that struggle with it. um and just being able to read the map and knowing the things to look for, comparing multiple maps. I mean, at this point we're getting off of even just the graphs on your boat. Anytime I have a tournament, I spend 3 4 nights, for a little club derby. I'll compare lake master maps, I will compare Google Earth, I will compare the mapping on Omnia, overlay things together. I'll pull, something up on my computer, and I'll have one map pulled up on my screen and maybe Google Earth pulled up on the TV, or something, and just kind of compare, contrast, look. Knowing how to use Google Earth, being able to go back and look, some of these impoundments. We've got one that's really close to home here. I spent a lot of time on. The mapping goes all the way back to the 80s. I mean, they're shitty, grainy black and white images, but if nothing else, it's neat to look at how much it's changed. Go through the time, see if you can find it when it was low, when it was high. Um, look where old stump fields used to be and go look for the broke off stumps nowadays. All that stuff is electronics. And I know there's so much hate on this stuff nowadays, but I remember fishing before the stuff we had today. I mean, my dad's first freaking GPS literally gave you an outline of the lake you were on, and it made a freaking line where you ran. There was no topographic anything. You didn't know your depth. You ran with a flasher. So by the time you seen that you were getting shallow, and if you were going to hit something, by the time you seen it, you were screwed. Like you already ran over top of it. Um, out of all the electronics on my boat, the only thing I would never give up is my mapping because it's a safety thing. I spend a lot of money on my boat and I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to lose a lower unit. I don't want to hit a rock pile. I don't want to scratch the shit out of the hull of my boat. Um, and mapping and being able to read graphs and all that, when I'm up shallow, I'm running an express. I like to play up in the shallow quite a bit. You honestly 90% of what I use my live scope for when I'm up shallow. Granted, I'm scanning around looking for stuff out deeper, looking to see if you can see stuff moving on the bottom. Like, don't get me wrong, but going through stump fields, them stumps that are just far enough under the water where they're hard to see in tannic water, but you'll find it with your trolling motor. The live scope saves my ass constantly. All this stuff has its safety value to it, and it's just a matter of looking at the whole picture and knowing what it is. Um, all right, we'll move on from the electronics now. I'll get off my pulpit. Uh, another important skill, and I guess this kind of is an odd tie between the mentality and skills, instinctive fishing. You know, I love the days when I can call my shot, boys in the back of the boat, and I feel like a freaking magician. I'll look at him, hey, see that stump up there? I'm going to make one pitch, and there's going to be one on there. Slide it up in there, drop it in nice and soft like, give it two twitches, bam, rod loads up, and my kid looks at me like I'm a psychic. It's the greatest feeling in the world, but it's instincts. It's years of doing it. Yeah, you're not going to call it right 100% of the time, but you know how much more efficient you are. You there's days where you can tell, a lot of lakes full of wood. Well, there might be one on here on this log. I'm going to fish it just because. But now this one looks like something tells me this one's good. So I might make a couple extra pops and snaps on that one, like knowing when to twitch it when you're coming past. I mean, it all becomes second nature. It's instinctual. And that all comes down to time on the water. I mean, none of these are skills you're just born with. It's having the dedication, the time to just go out there and learn it. Um, Another really necessary skill, especially if you're going to compete in any sort of trail, being able to even have a basic understanding of river systems, understanding current, eddies, um, and again, safety stuff. I mean, you don't want to fall out of the boat and in heavy current. You got to be careful. Heavy current, like understanding how it's going to push your boat, how it handles your boat maneuvering, and even on like lacrosse, part of the way, if you're not 100% sure on a wing dam or something, watch the ripples on the water. That's when you're driving, you constantly got to be scanning ahead of you because the on a nice flat day, the water tells the story of what's going on underneath. It ripples where the rocks are, where the current's going. Like if you just spend time and watch the surface of the water, it tells so much. You just got to be willing to look for it. Um, Another one that I would say is really important is being able, aside from casting in general, everybody should know how to do a sidearm. Everybody should be able to overhand and control it. Everybody should be able to flip. Everybody should be able to pitch. Everybody should be able to skip. To me, those are the basics. Spend the time, learn them. Like it's worth it. They're basic skills. If nothing else, I'm thankful that my dad instilled that us in us as kids. Like I used a spinning rod and a button pole for like a year. And I've been fishing tournaments since I was 8 years old. By the time I was 10, I was proficient enough with a bait caster. I could put a 3/8 ounce jig in a Dixie cup 30 feet away every freaking time. But dad spent the time, made us go out and practice. Um, going down the bank, watching us, telling us what we were doing wrong, what we can do to improve, taking the time to watch him. Still do that to this day. I'll be honest. I suck at sidearm skipping. I can do it. I'm proficient at it. Um, but I would much rather do an overhand roll skip. But there's times when you're farther away, that sidearm being able to bomb it all the way from the tip of a dock to the shore, that's where your power is. Learning the ins and outs of that, the biggest thing he always preached: don't look where you're scared the bait's going to go, because that's exactly where you're going to put it. If you're skipping under in between a dock and a pontoon, and you sit there and stare at that pontoon, 9 out of 10 times I'm going to bounce that jig off that pontoon. But if I keep my eye on the gap, don't try to overpower it, just ease it in there, it goes right where you want it. you know but taking the time to learn those skills, um but not just the casting itself. To me, the important part is how you're putting that bait in the water. And you have so much control. Like if you're just lobbing a bait out there and blooching it in the water, yeah, and sometimes it don't matter. Sometimes that's what you want, draw attention. But sometimes you want that thing to just covert slip in the water, so that fish is like, oh my God, this thing snuck up on me. It was there the whole time. Like you gotta be sneaky and shit sometimes. So being able to control that, or the little bit at the end of the cast, ooh, I overshot that tree branch, knowing how to slightly bring the bait back or slow the momentum down so you didn't just ruin a whole cast. Efficiency is important, and we're all guilty of messing it up. Like, don't get me wrong, some of the best skippers I know backlash 3 out of 10 times. I don't care how good you are, it happens. Or everybody forgets. Yeah, they make it look really easy when you're watching them on TV or watching somebody, but if you really pay attention, every third or fourth dock, they're turning around out the middle and bombing a cast out to straighten their line out. When you get in a hurry and keep trying to go with a puffed up line, spool, that's when dumb crap happens. But knowing when to make that call, when, okay, I got 20 feet between docks. I got enough time to bomb one out there, straighten it out. Being able to control the spool on a bait caster, being able to, I mean, there's tricks you can do on a spinning rod to slow it down and control it without totally botching the cast. I mean, they're just all little things you pick up over time, but I do feel like they're necessary skills. Um, and the ability to work a bait. We talked about the cadences and stuff with moving baits, but a jig. Sometimes you gotta drag a jig. Sometimes you gotta hop a jig. Sometimes you just gotta let it sit there and shake it a little bit. Having the comfortability to be able to keep it in one spot and just keep it twitching. I mean, it takes time. Those are legitimate skills. Um, but then another skill I think that's often overlooked is the ability to work a bait non-traditionally. Um, I've got a bunch of stuff that I probably do not use the way it was intended, and I've got stuff I know for a fact I don't. The core tackle hover rig. Honestly, I can't even tell you how it's supposed to be fished. That's not how I use it. I fish the not the weedless one, the original core tackle hover rig. I fish it on a robo worm and I fish grass with it. And it works freaking very well. And it's one of those oddball things. And what I do is I look for the holes in the grass or the edges of the grass, and I throw it and I watch it on the screen, and I hold tension on it, and I control the fall, and sometimes I'll pop it and flutter it back up, let it get to the bottom and work it out a little bit. You would not believe how often the fish come screaming out of hydrilla to come hit that thing. I'm like 95% sure that is not how that bait was intended to be fished. Or not that it's not meant to be fished that way, but that wasn't the original thought process behind it. I'm sure of it. Um, so I mean, really, being able to think outside of the box on stuff is a skill. Some people just are not wired to look at things for anything beyond the face value or the expectation that was set for it. Um, so to kind of go back over this, I think the perfect angler, as far as skill set, granted, the basics should be a given, but there's a lot of guys, and there's a lot of really good guys that are totally neglecting some basics. And if it works for you, there's nothing wrong with that. But to me, the perfect angler has all the basics in a row. The understanding electronics, the different comprehension of all these different baits, and can take all these things, these random pieces to a puzzle, and consistently put that puzzle together in no time, mixing what's going on in your head with what you're physically doing. That's why nobody's perfect. But the point of this list isn't to make anybody feel inferior or anything. Like, that's not it at all. Like, we're all freaking human. But just things to think about, things to strive for. Another skill, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it. um time on the water. That is the most important thing you can do. Nobody gets where they are by not spending the time out there. Why? That's a lot of the reason why some of these young kids are kicking the crap out of the old heads. It, it's been said in a million other podcasts. I'm not getting into it, but time on the water and consistently doing it is so important. Um, so now we'll move on to the next one. I would say, granted, this is a skill to an extent, but it's separate from the fishing itself. It's an outlier. And I would say it's a mixture of boat handling and water management. And everything we talk about here keeps coming down to efficiency. Um, Constantly look at the situation and find a way to make it more efficient. Sorry, I had a phone call. Um, there, I don't care what you do, how long you've been doing it, you can always improve. And the second you stop looking to improve is the second we stop growing as human beings. Part of what I love so much about fishing is how much you can carry things over to your daily life, and how many things you can learn in fishing that matter so much everywhere else if you just take the time to learn them. um I mean, when I'm doing something at work, yeah, the first time I do it, like, it's a shit show. I'm learning, I'm struggling through it. You ask for help where you can. But the biggest thing is learning how you need to change things and how you need to do things to make it more efficient. You know, so efficiency is a very important part of boat and water management, whether it's having your boat laid out so you know where everything is, keeping your pliers and your scissors and all that stuff so you can easily find it, having your rod locker clean so it's not an absolute freaking mess every time you go in there. um if you're fishing shallow, jack the jack plate up, trim the motor up a little bit. That way, when you're fighting a fish and you're next to a bunch of stumps or a rock pile or you're drifting up on shore, you don't have that oh shit moment where you're fighting a freaking 5 pounder trying to run back and deal with that mess. Um, the efficiency with water management, knowing what the pattern is. Well, I can kind of skip over this stuff, or they're not in the dead spaces between structure, knowing which structure to target. Am I wasting my time fishing wood? Am I wasting my time targeting rock? Am I wasting my time targeting transitions? If you can take the time and figure out what's going on, you can efficiently cut crap out of the picture. Quit wasting time. Just, freaking put that milk run together in your head and do it. Um, Boat positioning is a big one. Every one of us freaking struggles with it to an extent. Um, you know, Fishing out deep, knowing this is the angle I got to be at, but the wind's going to fight me today. Can I come around from the other side, make the same cast backwards? Will it hurt anything? That way, my spot lock's holding me into the wind. Um, Fishing docks when you're on the windy side of the bank, the wind wants to push you into the docks the whole time. And that's always a scary situation because not only are you risking wrecking your own shit, you're risking wrecking other people's stuff, and that ain't cool. Um, Nobody wants to be bouncing their boat off the prop on somebody's pontoon, or you're too preoccupied and fighting the wind and a cast gets away from you and you took the windshield out with on somebody's fishing ski like you don't. Or her favorite one from the club, hanging a Cinco up in the gas line on somebody's motor. Not cool. The boat owner was rightfully pretty pissed off. I mean, yeah, it cost a little bit of money to replace that hose, but you just dumped freaking how many gallons of gas into a lake? You inconvenienced that guy. Like, efficiency all ties into that. An efficient person wouldn't have done that. But not just the trolling motor aspect of things. Boat positioning like bed fishing. How close can I get? Do you pull down? Another good one with efficiency. If I know I'm going to be pulling down fishing beds or fishing docks, I don't pull my poles all the way back up. I stand on the pedal, creep them up just enough so they clear, and then double tap it again when I'm going to stop. The control, turn your trolling motor down sometimes going down the bank or turn it up. If it's taking you too long to fish something and you need to force yourself to cover water, turn the trolling motor up. As long as you can handle it, just don't forget that you got it on 10 and have it kick sideways and step on the pedal. I mean, most of us have almost gone in the drink doing that. Um, and another key part of management is co-angler awareness. Um, we did a whole episode on being a co-angler, and depending on the situation, a team tournament, you want to keep in a team tournament, you want to keep the guy in the back of the boat so he can efficiently aid the team. Don't let him know, hey, I'm going to go every other. I'm going to flip this tree. It's close enough together when I'm flipping. You get the next one, but I'm going to move up far enough that I can flip the next tree while you're flipping this one. Um, or hey, I'm gonna flip all the docks. You run a swim jig or something in between them. Um, just be aware of what they're doing. If they need a hand, if they're hung up. I mean, it sucks tournament day. Like you don't always have time to babysit, but just be aware. Be aware for netting. Be aware if they get a fish on and it's coming at the front of the boat, in the back of the boat. If it wants to go in the trolling motor, there's only so much they can do to keep it out of there. Or wrapped up in the prop on your motor, tangled up in the freaking power poles. Like, there's a plethora of things that can go horribly wrong. Um, Another one is time management. How much time do I spend on this spot? How much time do I spend on this bed? How much time do I spend on plan A before we totally abort it and move on to plan B? How much time do I spend soaking a Cinco? How much time do I in between twitches on a jerk bait? I mean, time is everything. Your average tournament's an 8 hour day. Like you got a lot of decisions to make in 8 hours and knowing how to use your time and when. Time management as far as, hey, the first 2 hours I'm gonna go here, here, and here and try to get a couple topwater fish, and then at noon I need to be here, and then towards the end of the day I got spots here, here, and here I need to hit. Keeping an eye. I got an hour run on Sturgeon Bay, so I got to make sure I leave an hour and a half early before weigh-in time to make sure, in case God forbid something stupid happens, that I can get back on time. Time management with locking, time management with all. I mean, it's freaking endless. The greatest evil in this world is time and our lack of control on it. And even though we can't control it, we need to be aware of it and dictate our actions in the time we have. Um, Another key part of managing the water is knowing when to leave fish. Hey, we're on a school on a rock pile, but we got a limit of 2 pounders. I know it's going to take 20 pounds to win this tournament. We just got to leave these fish. We can't sit here and keep freaking, yeah, we're having fun catching these 2 pounders, but we need to go hunt some threes, fours, and fives. Spending too much time on a bed. Hey, I found a pile of smallies, but it's going to take largemouth to win this tournament. Knowing when to leave fish is a key thing. And a lot of us get caught up because at the end of the day, we love catching fish. But knowing when to walk away from them and look for more is a pretty important thing. Another boat and water management skill is playing the wind. Do I want to fish the windy bank? Do I want to fish the bank with no wind on it? Do they want to be on wind blown points? How do I need to position my boat in the wind? Those are all pretty important things. And then, another really hard key one is knowing the right cast. There's a lot of deep spots where you got to hit the size. You could be on a giant rock pile, but they're, for whatever reason, focused on something the size of a tire. And if you don't hit that tire sized area with your bait, you're not getting a bite. Knowing the angles you have to hit, thinking of, well, this is how people would normally fish it. Maybe I change the angle a little bit this way. Maybe I put the ass end of my boat up in the shallows and pull down and fish it, like I'd be fishing off the bank. Um, Boat positioning, angles, it's all important. Or, another one, right casts on docks. Everybody goes for the easy one. Everybody fishes the sides and fishes the face of it. The point of skipping a dock is to get up where nobody else has the balls to put their bait. Don't take me as an arrogant snob, anything like that. My jig box probably weighs 50 pounds. My flipping jigs. I have a ridiculous amount of money invested in jigs. I don't give a shit when I lose one. On tournament day, if I hang up on a dock, I give it an honest effort to get it off. Normally, if it's on the dock, whatever, I'll do what I got to get it off. But if it's in a tree or they got cables under their dock underneath, I'm not going to sit here and waste my time. They put the freaking rope down there, they put the cable down there. Say what you want, I'm snapping it off and tying another one on because it's faster for me to do that. I buy jigs knowing I'm going to lose them. It's an unfortunate fact of what we do. I like to throw jigs where they don't belong, and I catch a lot of fish doing it. Great big thick brush piles, but knowing the angle to throw it in there. On the dock, avoid the easy cat. I mean, not avoid, but think outside the box. Sometimes they want it in that little freaking gap between the boat lift and the dock itself. Sometimes they want it up casting into the bunks on the boat lift. Uh, Knowing the right cast is a very key thing. Um, and again, safety reasons why boat control is so important. Um, how often do you go down the bank and shit, you went 100 yards, didn't see any stumps or nothing, and all of a sudden you whack a freaking tree out of nowhere, or freaking metal pipe sticking up out of nowhere. That'll ruin anybody's day in a freaking hurry. Um, when you're fishing in a stump field or something, not letting you get the wind blow you on top of a stump and making a whole new mess, like, and being aware of how your spot lock works. There's a lot of times that thing will have a mind of its own and it decides we're going freaking Mach 80 straight left. I'm in the middle of a cast, the boat jolts out from underneath me, having the self awareness to catch yourself, or when you fall, land on the deck of the boat, not the water. I mean, it terrifies me falling out with the freaking spot lock on and that damn thing run me over and cut me all to crap or get away from me too fast and end up ruining my trolling motor on shore. I mean, dumb crap can happen in a hurry when you're fishing. Um, like I said, another key part to building a perfect angler, on top of the actual fishing skills, is the boat skills and the water management skills. A f- you can't be perfect without it. You can't be perfect anyways, but we can all strive. Another key thing, I think for making a perfect angler is the tackle philosophy. It's clearly no secret. I have a ridiculous amount of tackle. My garage looks like a bait shop. I have crap that I will probably never throw, never need it, but it's there in the off chance that, hey, for whatever reason today, this is the thing. They like this here, whatever. Um, Now this one, I don't know what the right answer is on this one. I'll leave this up to everybody else, but I'll kind of go over the my thought process on it. Um, is the perfect angler the minimalist? As much as we talk about efficiency, I know for a fact I would be a lot more efficient if I didn't carry so much crap in my boat. Um, you know, I know I could get away with bringing 2 or 3 bags of certain things and probably be fine. Do I need to carry around a 40 or 50 pound freaking jig box? No. I mean, even on a bad day, if I go through 5 jigs, that was a pretty bad day. Um, but at the same time, is it really a bad thing being a tackle hoarder? How many times are you in the boat, you minimalist guys? God, I wish I had this. I wish I had that. Oh, I took my top water rod out, but they're busting surface over there. Just stuff like that. What about, we kind of made fun of the guy that throws a jig 365 days a year. Sometimes would it be better just to stick with your confidence bait? I mean, honestly, I could maybe narrow it down to 4 or 5 baits, probably live and die on them and do fairly well. The reason I don't is part of what I love about fishing is learning. I'm constantly pushing myself to learn something new, figure something new out. So if you go to the same old staples every time, at what point are you done learning? Um, what about the tech junkies? I had no problem catching fish before technology. Like I said, the one thing I absolutely would not want to live without nowadays would be the mapping. But there's some freaking hammers out there that turn the graphs off and do just fine. Um, I've still got spots that we've fished for years that I don't even look at the graph when I fish them. I still triangulate in my head where I need to be, and it's just habit. Not that I don't, after I make a few casts that way, still utilize the electronics, but they're not a necessity. Um, and other things that could be debated. What's better, having 5 rods or 30 rods? Is there an issue with having too many confidence baits? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd honestly be curious to hear people's thoughts on this one because I don't know where to stand on this one. I don't have even an opinion on it because I know the way I do things tackle wise isn't necessarily the right way to do it. I envy the guys that run with half the crap. Um, so now at this point, we're gonna kind of change gears for a second. And I want to get in before we get to the fatal flaws in the why we can't be a perfect world and what screws most of us. We're gonna do the budget build challenge. Um, so like I said, what I decided to do here was try to put together a respectable skipping rod for under 300 bucks. You could go cheaper. My only thing is, when you got a skipping setup, you don't want to cheap out on the reel. I've got one or two cast kings that skip all right. I mean, that's as cheap as I go on a reel. And even there, I have a hard time. I don't anything under $100, in my opinion, isn't worth the freaking metal and plastic it's made out of. But the action and tip on a rod are what matter the most. But there are a lot of cheaper rods out there that have a good tip, have a good action, are heavy enough to bury the hook. Normally with cheap rods, there's only two types. They're either freaking wet noodles or they're broomsticks. And to me, skipping, I mean, you're definitely walking the line of a broomstick. But so we'll get into it. So for a rod, I went with a Abu Garcia Vendetta casting rod in a 6'9", medium heavy with a fast tip. Something about 6'9" with a skipping rod is the perfect rod. Honestly, I could probably go a little shorter because I'm a stubby little sawed off bastard. And sometimes I wonder if that length doesn't screw me to an extent. But I do like the length for burying the hook, for being able to get it high and winch them out of crap real quick. Like, it's what I was taught to do, and it's what I go with because I'm not going to drop a bunch of money on a rod and not know if it's going to do what I want it to do or not. But with a skipping setup, I would highly recommend 6'9", medium heavy, fast tip. Like you're good. Um Abu Garcias tend to run a little light, in my opinion. I'm used to throwing Falcons. Um, but I've used Vendettas. I think I might have one left. They're not a bad rod. I was able to find, I'm assuming it must be the discontinued model from last year, on sale on Abu Garcia's website right now for $77, which is a really good deal for that rod. Um, I don't think you would have any problems with it. It would be a perfect budget rod. Now, where we're going to spend the most money on this, because like I said, the most important part on a skipping setup is the reel. You need good brakes. Um, yeah, there's guys out there that skip with brakes completely turned off, but 99% of us are never going to be that guy. It is a mix of having faith in your braking system and knowing how to control that spool with your thumb. Uh, just by watching what the bait's doing, how it felt when you let your thumb go to let it fly, and keeping your thumb riding on that spool just to feel when that spool's starting to go a little crazy and knowing when to tap it and feather it. And but so for a reel, I went with a Daiwa Tatula, no surprise, X casting reel, 8 1-1. Um for skipping, I want the fastest gear ratio I can. To me, skipping docks is the philosophy that Kevin runs with. The more casts I can make, the more fish I can put it in front of, the more efficient it is. So that gear ratio, it gets them out of there real quick, and then when you don't get a bite, you can burn it out of there and make another cast. Um, just a little tip here: if you're learning to skip, what I actually, when I start out for the season, I normally do this till I get my groove back. The first time I go out, I bring a roll of electrical tape with me, and I will take that reel and I will make a bomb cast as far out as it will go. I will then not engage the reel. I will take electrical tape and wrap it around the spool. Not, I mean, don't freaking close it off, but give it so that that's the most line that's coming out of there on a cast, which 50, 80 yards, somewhere in there. Reel it in. Then adjust your brakes and everything for skipping and whatnot. And the trick is, when you mess up, because you're going to mess up, we all mess up when it comes to skipping, your line can backlash, but it can't backlash past that tape. So you're not burying a bird's nest all the way down in the spool. So whether that just makes it easier to pick it out, or you at least got enough line left on that spool that you can salvage the day out without having to sit down in the boat and re-spool quick. Just a little food for thought there. Highly recommend. There's nothing wrong with doing it. That's how I teach my kids to do it. So that reel comes in at $150. Spending almost twice as much on the reel as the rod. And there are certain techniques where you want to do the exact opposite. But when it comes to skipping, the reel is what matters. Just take my word for it. Spend the money on a reel. Don't cheap out and buy a favorite or a cast king or something like that. Um, Next, we'll get into the line. I used to be a die-hard 20-pound fluorocarbon. Um, but when I get hung up on a dock, when you have to put your trolling motor on high and point it in the opposite direction and yank with everything you got and pinch the line between the rod and your hand and hold the spool, and then that line snaps and it sounds like a freaking 22 went off, it snaps you in the arm and leaves a welt. 20 pounds too, it's too much. Um, you know, so I've downgraded down to 17-pound, and it is still a freaking nightmare to break. But it's more manageable. It's plenty strong. It can take the abrasion or rub it on freaking cross members on docks and rub. You should always be checking it. Just, either way, even if you got 20-pound on, you can't just pretend that it's freaking invincible. Every so many casts, or if you ran through something, run your hand down the bottom 3 feet, feel for any nicks or abrasions. If you got something, cut it off and retie. Um, but so for that, I went with P-Line Tactical in 17-pound and a 200-yard spool. A $32 spool line. Good fluorocarbon isn't cheap. Um, I run a lot of P-Line. I run a lot of Sunline. To me, they're a horse apiece. And then for some baits to get started, I went with the TNT Tackle depth charge skipping jigs. Two of them in triple berry and two of them in water craw. That should be enough starting out, learning how to do it. It's a perfectly weighted jig for doing it. I've said it before. I think you only really need black and blue and green pumpkin. Well, a lot of people throw black and blue and green pumpkin. So when I say that, I mean some sort of variation. I still like to be a little different, but I think that's the general color palettes. 90% of time, that's all you need. So two of each of them comes in at $20 for your jigs. And you could actually get them a little bit better if you use the code TBP 15 for 15% off on TNT Tackle's website. Um, awesome jigs, awesome tackle company. He does not pay me to say that. That is legitimately, if you come fishing with me, my jig box is all TNT tackle jigs. But yeah, so that's where we're at with the jigs. And then for soft plastics, I did 2 bags of Bama Magic. Yum spine craws. Um, I like on a 3/8 ounce jig, I like to either go a skinnier, more water dynamic, so it's fighting the water less, it falls faster if that's what I want. Otherwise, something along the lines of a rage cross, something that's going to fight the water and slow it down. That's the point of the saw. I mean, like the action on the trailer matters. But I look at it as, do I want them to have the time to look at it, or do I want it to fly past them and make them make a decision? So for this setup, honestly, that's what I throw 90% of the time for a jig trailer is Yum Spine Craws. And I went with the Bama Magic because it's like a green pumpkin and blue. It'll work with triple berry and it'll work with the Clearwater Craw. It's the best of both worlds. 2 bags of them for $8. So now with all that stuff, I mean, that's one hell of a skipping setup. You will not go wrong. $287. So I even kept it under 300. Get yourself a couple more packs of spine craws or a few more jigs. Um, But for the money, that would be one heck of a skipping setup to learn on, or just to have another one on the deck of the boat, a backup when you got a backlash, whatever. Um, all right. So moving on, we'll get into the fifth and final section of this, the fatal flaw. There is no perfect angler. I don't care what you do, how good you are. Everybody's going to have a bad day. Everybody's got a quirk. Whether the dude is superstitious and somebody threw a banana in his boat and he's in his head all day, damn it, I had a banana in the boat and we're screwed. My superstition on top of the bananas is the net. If you touch the net and get it out and get it ready before I get the first fish to the boat and I don't have to struggle for it, my whole day is screwed. I have to fumble, mess around with that first fish, grabbing my net, getting it out. As long as I do that, the day's good. Sometimes. Other common fatal flaws, can't fish slow. There's a lot of guys that are that way, just got to cover water. I would argue a lot of times I have the exact opposite problem. I like to fish slow. I like to pick things apart. I am terrible at just covering water. Um, it is what it is. I work on it. I'm human. Another real simple one to do is the panic set a hook. Oh, you felt that tap and rip it away from them. Sometimes you got to let them have it for a minute. I mean, you don't want them to swallow it and rip their guts out when you freaking hammer them, but an easy fatal flaw. And unfortunately, we go in streaks of doing it. You do it once, you get fixated on it, and then you keep doing it. Or fishing a swim jig, you don't set the hook on a swim jig. You wait for the rod to load up and then you sweep into it and keep reeling. If you try to set the hook on a swim jig, you're going to rip it away from them every freaking time. Unless it's a pike, and then they just bite the damn thing off, and there you sit with an empty line. Another fatal flaw, and I'm probably guilty of this, buys every lure at the tackle shop. Every new thing that comes out, you got to get it, you got to try it. You throw it one time, it goes in a box, you never look at it again. We all go in streaks with that. It is what it is, but it is a fatal flaw. Another really hard one is always fishing history. That will burn you 10 ways to Sunday. My two favorite lakes around here, that is the pitfall I fall in constantly. I go out pre-fishing for a day, and my intent is to just go look around and find new crap. And I struggle so hard with it. Well, I want to go check this. They should be here. And then they are, and you spend the whole day doing that, and you learned absolutely nothing new. Um, History is a good thing. History is a shitty thing. Knowing when to use it, how to glean relevant information from history, I think is where people would do much better. There's a lot of guys that go on streaks of losing giant fish at the boat. That is like the most fatal flaw there is. And it seems like once you do it once, you keep doing it until you get out of that streak, whether they're breaking off, you had a bad hook set, they're ripping the hook off, swatting your partner's fish off with the net. It's a good way to get a black eye, but it happens. Um, and it's hard to get back out of your head after you do it. Losing a big fish can ruin your whole freaking day. Another one is forgetting the drain plug. Not terrible to the overall, but that can ruin your morning in a hurry. Nothing like getting wet feet when you're not expecting it. And then a giant fatal flaw. I do not allow a radio on my boat. I do not like noise. Not so bad out deep, but I don't even want to talk or have a conversation when I'm fishing. That's why I 90% of the time enjoy fishing by myself. I want to be alone with my thoughts. I want my time to reflect, have it out with my maker, whatever I got to do for the day. Some of my best and worst ideas happen on the boat. I hate to admit how many life decisions have been made on the deck of a boat. Um, that is my happy place. That is mine and mine alone. I don't like noise. It's my boat. Freaking deal with it. But there are a lot of people, especially in shallow water, talking loud, dropping things in the bottom of the boat, slamming lids, tripping over crap. Like that noise spooks fish, and noise travels so much farther in the water. There's fish 200 yards away that just heard you drop your freaking pop bottle in the bottom of the boat. Um, every fish on that bank just heard you bang that jig off that pontoon. Like it sucks. It's a fact of life. We can't always help it, but it's something that you can actively try to avoid. Sometimes turning the electronics off when you're up shallow. Turn your transducers so they're not pinging. Keep the trolling motor down low. Or when they're loud, switch out the bushings in there. Maybe put a new prop on. Quiet is good. It's like hunting, because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're hunting for fish. So like I said, a lot of this is purely subjective, purely my thought process. But it is something I like to think of. It gives me things to strive for, things to try to learn. um I'm never going to be perfect. Most days I'm hardly adequate, but I try. And that's all any of us can do, and that's all any of us can ask for. Um, what the hell did I do here? Oh, forgive me. My notes decided to do funky things. Alrighty, so that's what I got for building the perfect angler. We're gonna end it like we always do on the final cast. I actually had one written down here because doing these off the freaking brim of my hat don't always work out the greatest. All right, so I just got kind of stupid, but I don't know why the hell it popped into my head. Um, when you walk past a guy's boat and you smell coffee, garlic, and Copenhagen, there is a pretty good chance that that is one dangerous individual. Thank you for watching the Timberline Bass Podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, comment, all that normal stuff. Thank you very much for your support.